but is just destined to be a major issue for a lot of parents when the people we care most about, our children, come in contact with the institution with which we spend so much time, television. When it comes to the subject of children's television, questions are increasingly being raised, both here in the U.S. and abroad.
Children have always played war games, but the formula of these films and toys is feeding children's impulse to violent play and limiting their development.
During the next hour, we will be hearing the concerns of viewers both here in Minnesota and in London, where many of the newest American kids shows are now also being seen. And we'll be hearing from some of the people who make day-to-day decisions about what our children will see on these shows. It promises to be a fascinating debate, so stick with us for this special edition of Almanac Extra.
Almanac Extra is part of the Survive Project, made possible by grants from the Pillsbury Company Foundation and the Northwest Area Foundation. Additional funding is provided by the James R. Thorpe Foundation, First Banks, members of First Bank System, and the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and its newspaper and education program serving Minnesota schools.
Last night here on Almanac Extra, we looked at how TV program executives in Minnesota view their responsibilities in the area of children's television. But with the death of most local kids shows, Minnesotans have precious little to say about the content and quality of children's TV. So tonight, we move on to the national and international debate. We have some of the creators of American children's TV programs here in our studio to be questioned from the Channel 4 London studios of Right to Reply by a group of concerned British parents and teachers. Now, Right to Reply is a weekly show designed to give British viewers a chance to talk back to the people who produce programs there. Tonight's host in London will be Trevor Hyatt, whose job will be to assist viewers in their questioning. Now, his role is not that of an impartial moderator. So, if all the electronic gadgets are in order, off to London we go.
Greetings. It's good to have you with us. Here in London, we have 4 viewers who say that US cartoons are cheap, violent, of dubious morality, nothing but half-hour ads for the toys, and that's just for starters. We also have with us 2 TV bosses, one from each of the principal networks, BBC and ITV. They're responsible for putting these cartoons onto the British screens. And remember, in true Right to Reply style, I'm not an impartial presenter. I'm always on the side of the viewers. It's my job to make sure that they get their say. So be prepared. I may get interrupted.
Thanks, Trevor, and greetings to all of you. Now, on our side of things tonight, we will be taking a look at how children's television is made here in the U.S. We'll do that through the eyes of the producers of the international smash hit, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Later, we will then be joined in our studio by a children's television producer, a toy representative, and a psychologist. They will answer some of the criticisms you have raised.
Well, thank you, Jan. We look forward to that. We're not too familiar with your TV system, and I dare say you may not know ours. So please allow me to explain rather briefly how British television works. There are 2 main organisations, the BBC, with its 2 channels, funded directly by the viewer and the taxpayer, and which does not take advertising. ITV and Channel 4 do. Ultimately, of course, British television is accountable to Parliament, but the BBC is watched over by its Board of Governors, and ITV and Channel 4 by the Independent Broadcasting Authority, the IBA. They both have similar rules about the kind of programs you can and cannot include on children's television, and they both have always reserved time specifically for children. Currently, that amounts to about 2 hours every weekday. So, here's a taste of the richness and variety of how it is, and how it was, through 35 years of British children's television.
Is coming to play, la 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 la. Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, Bill and Ben, powerpuff men. Powerpuff men.
Here's a house Here's a door. Windows. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, it's Crackerjack. The ladies have won. Well done.
Stop racing! We've done it! We've done it!
This is the new boy, sir, David Copperfield.
He knows me, and I know him. Do you know me? Hey.
Hello there. Do you know this game? It's called O'Grady.
1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, 3 for a girl, and 4 for a boy.
Hello.
What were you doing? You look
Well,
crazy.
there you are.
Ha! Ha ha ha! Snap!
Nap.
Snap, Toad. We are playing bridge.
Hang about, look out for Superfriends.
In 1987, children watch an average of about 23 hours of television per week, and cartoons like these are more popular than ever before. Many of them have well-developed characters, lots of fun and humor, and strong dramatic storyline. But parents are beginning to worry about the impact of a new breed of cartoons, which burst onto British screens in 1983.
He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe.
And He-Man certainly exerts a lot of power on its young audience, say our critics. And he isn't the only American cartoon to invade our screens. BBC and ITV also parade She-Ra, Thundercats, GoBots, Transformers, My Little Pony and Care Bears. The list goes on, and some would say on and on. But compared with what you have over there, Jan, we ain't seen nothing yet. Is that true?
Well, that certainly is true. You'll see how we arrived at that point in just a minute. While you grew up watching Magpie and Crackerjack, well, American children spent a lot of time watching the likes of Howdy Doody and Captain Kangaroo.
Now, boys and girls, CBS Television presents Captain Kangaroo and his treasure house.
Believe it or not, this is what the golden age of American children's television looked like. America's baby boomers grew up on a steady diet of daily network studio shows like Captain Kangaroo.
Why do they call me Kangaroo? Well, that's pretty easy to see. Look at this right here. See? See the great big pockets I've got? Look at them. Just loaded down. That's why, because I got pockets like a kangaroo.
And many local stations had their own versions. Daily shows where a friendly adult, usually a male, invited kids to actually participate in the production of the studio portions of the program.
I don't have any crew members here to fire up the time converter for me, so maybe I'll have to do it all by myself.
I'll go fire it up.
What'd you say, sir?
I'll go fire it up.
You'll fire it up?
Yeah.
You're going to volunteer to fire it up today, huh? Well, turn around here.
There wasn't much sophistication during these early years, and there wasn't much government oversight either. The phone didn't ring very often over at the Federal Communications Commission.
What did you do at the keyhole, little Bo? Peep?
Much of that changed, however, in the late 60s and early 70s. Consumer groups became particularly concerned over the dual role served by many of these kids' TV hosts, befriending the children one moment and then turning around to endorse commercial products the next.
What do you think of Yoo-Hoo? Isn't that great? Now say, Yoo-Hoo! Yoo-Hoo! Okay.
The 1980s have seen further changes. The Reagan-controlled FCC has taken a free market approach to children's television. Gone is the requirement that local stations must broadcast a minimum number of hours of local programming, including children's shows, each week. And in 1983, one controversial ruling paved the way for entire cartoon series to be built around existing action toy products, like the Transformers or Masters of the Universe.
I am She-Ra!
These are the shows that have caused so much concern both here and in Great Britain. That 1983 ruling has allowed these cartoons to virtually dominate after-school and Saturday morning television all across the U.S.
With us is Patricia Marks Greenfield, a professor of psychology and author of the book Mind and Media. Patricia, what is the current thinking about the extent of violence in present-day kids' TV programming in the United States?
current cartoons are less violent than the cartoons of yesterday.
In what way?
Well, one interesting thing is to go back to the Disney cartoons, which I understand are quite appreciated in England. The Disney cartoons don't have so much physical violence, but people are really mean to each other. The characters are really mean. They're always playing pranks. They're always saying nasty things. Then if you look at, and in contrast, the cartoons of today, the good guys act nicer to each other. Within the good guys, there are really positive relations, generally, sometimes empathetic relations, and so on and so forth. So in some ways, we're getting a better model. If you look back at something like Tom and Jerry, those have no plot whatsoever. They're just acts of violence, acts of physical violence. On top of that, these terrible things happen to the characters, like they blow up, but the violence has no consequence whatsoever. No one ever dies. So you're learning, if you're a child, that violence doesn't matter. Unfortunately, this characteristic has come into all the modern day violence as well. Violence without suffering, violence without consequences.
Do you think that there should be pain shown on the part of cartoon characters if they are exposed to violence?
I do, indeed. I think there would be a lot less violence because people don't like to see pain. I think there should be a lot less violence, but I think where there is violence, the real-world consequences should be shown.
Patricia, are you concerned that there still may be too much violence to which children are exposed?
I think in American television, there is too much violence. There aren't enough alternatives. In England, I think they still have a lot more alternatives. I think we desperately need to show alternative methods of conflict resolution.
Very good. Well, clearly, we're hearing some concerns, Trevor. What are people saying about all of this in Britain?
Well, yeah, most of the reaction that we've had has been from parents and teachers who come into our video boxes. Now, the video box is a unique feature of Right to Reply. It's a kind of do-it-yourself mini TV studio, somewhat like a photo booth, and anyone can come in and sound off about anything on British television. Now, we have a network of video boxes across the country, but in order to get the children's reactions to the cartoons, we went to a school in the north of England.
Children have always played war games, but the formula of these films and toys is feeding children's impulse to violent play and limiting their development.
It's full of violence, full of force, full of noise. If there is a problem, come along, I can solve it because I'm stronger, more forceful, more powerful than you.
I think there are 20 or 30 minutes of pure, unadulterated advertising for the spin-off products from these cartoons. Plastic moulded men and vehicles, which I think are grossly overpriced.
Cruising for the cruising. What happens to a certain extent is everybody starts comparing, how much money's been spent and what they've got at home, what they're going to get for Christmas, who's going to buy what, and it definitely creates a desire. I mean, the children who don't have as many, everybody knows, oh, I haven't seen that, you haven't got that. You only had two, therefore, you're not quite one of the gang if you don't have them. I think it creates an awful pressure on children to actually want them. And to a certain extent, I think they'll go to any end to actually, possess them.
The children want them for the sake of having something. I don't think the toys themselves are that interesting. I can't see how you could play with them for a great deal of time because there's not a lot you can do with them, and an awful lot of them don't even stand up. So you can't sort of position them or anything like that. And they're incredibly expensive. There must just be a tremendous pressure on parents because, it gives you sort of power within your peer group if you have all the toys.
By the power of Grayskull!
these sort of products, which we call character merchandise, that is anything that's related to television or some of the untelevised product, are absolutely dependent on whether the series is on at the time we're trying to sell them. It has to be said, there isn't a play value until people have seen a few episodes and started to identify. As soon as you start to know who Lion-O is in the Thundercats, as soon as this is just an absolutely standard plastic sword. I could sell this for 3 times its price today because they're of an enormous rarity value. Everyone wants Lion-O's sword. It's meaningless without the connection.
I very strongly object to the way children are bombarded, not just by the toys, but by the other merchandising that goes on. We get Thundercats on lunch boxes, on linen for the bedroom, on pencil cases, on exercise books, etc. It seems that these days when you go to buy something, you've got no choice.
This year, anything that isn't what we call character merchandise is going to grow by maybe 2 or 3%. But the character toys will be 25% up this year to reach something like £300 million worth of toys which are related to prime TV characters.
I am She-Ra!
As a parent and teacher of young children, I find it very difficult to cope with this kind of commercialism. There is carefully calculated pressure on parents to buy all the figures plus accessories and the spin-off comics. The programs themselves are violent and aggressive and present a one-dimensional world of goodies and baddies.
Commercial interest is succeeding over questions of morality. Children are being subjected to commercial pressures which give them an oversimplified view of right and wrong and a belief that force is all-important.
If you say to them, for instance, why do you think He-Man's good? Because he's the best fighter, isn't he? And I think that kind of attitude is rather horrid, really. And also, even the actual image of He-Man, the enormous muscles, the Mr. Universe macho image, brawn rather than brains. If you have a problem, solve it with a...
Thanks for giving me a little breather, Ram Man.
It does sort of like filter through in terms of aggressive behaviour. Not really directed at anybody. What actually happens is, a child might just, He-Man and do a punch or a jump, which in itself is a sort of threatening action without actually there being a direct, sort of hit or blow at somebody.
The other thing that concerns me is in the programme that if you're good, you can do whatever you like. If you're bad, you can't. It seems to me that the goodies are just as horrible as the baddies. It's far too black and white. There's no in-between in the programmes for the children to think about.
If you watch the cartoons and you've got the figures, you can try to copy off the television what's going on the television. After I've watched He-Man, and I'll go upstairs and get my He-Man figures and see if I can remember what was happened.
I think the way the women are represented in the cartoons is pretty awful. Although they're given the trappings of the macho males, they still play a very dominated role.
Sheila, use my sword!
This is happening now in America, where the proportion of such films in children's television time is far greater. It's urgent that we in Britain should stop the advance of this exploitation of the young.
First of all, the purchase of any program, when we're looking at acquired material, and we're looking particularly at acquired American animation or European animation, we do 2 things. We look at the show, and we make judgments about whether it's a good show for our schedules. Because actually, from our point of view, we're about putting together a television schedule that's an entertainment information service for children.
I mean, we mustn't forget that these are extremely popular programs. We're not talking about programs which we're forcing on the public. We're talking about programs which are immensely popular. And they're immensely popular because of the characters and the animation, and the merchandising is immensely popular.
What about the violence? I mean, they are, although it's stylized, there is a lot of zip, zap, bit, wham. I mean, Claire, is the authority anxious?
So I find it's the lack of subtlety that worries me. If you analyse the actual amount of violence, it may not be very great, but there's a very raw, crude storyline to each episode, or even if it's split up, is a battle and the goodies are going to win. And it's that crude level of storyline, I think, that worries me.
The reality is we're assessing what is offered to us. What is offered to us is this kind of material. I'm utterly convinced that we take the sort of care, product by product or program by program, that we do over all programming.
I can't see any reason to try and formulate even more rigid guidelines. I mean, I think as long as people who have come to this meeting very quickly absorb what we're in the business of doing, I don't think there's too much cause for concern.
By the power of Grayskull!
If we are trying to encourage sensitive and thoughtful behaviour in children and later in adults, are these really the models of behaviour and attitudes that we should be providing?
Well, in our studio, we have 4 parents who think not. They're Ruth Grindrod, Nigel Andrew, Jean Seaton, and Teresa Cooley. They'll be confronting Anna Hume, head of children's programmes at the BBC, and from the commercial ITV network, Andy Allen, director of programmes at Central Television and chairman of the committee we've just seen. Let me start with you, Jean Seaton, and invite you to tell Anna Hume and Andy Allen why you think these programmes aren't good enough.
Well, I understand the political and economic reasons which may force you to actually purchase those programmes, but I thought
Forgive me interrupting, what do you think they are?
Well, because they're quite cheap, and because they're, as it were, children's programming is under threat and will be more under threat, so you're buying cheap programming. But I would have thought that your job was to actually start to fight the battles, which are going to get much more difficult when there's cable and satellite, and make those programmes better. And I'd have thought anybody that watched them, indeed you, would have thought that the storyline was so trivial as to be utterly boring. The only thing that matters is the bonk with the sword. Indeed, the man that made He-Man said he was bored with the story of He-Man. He thought he'd have to kill off Skeletor because he was so bored with his own programme. And the characterisation is extremely slimy and thin. There is nothing that makes a goody good, except that they have inherited goodness. They don't do anything to get to be good. The programmes are, the actual pictures are very poor quality. It's not like Dogtaniel, beautiful Dogtaniel made in Europe. It's not like sort of Super Ted.
Jean, you've listed a whole catalogue of complaints there. Andy, pick anyone you like and give your answer.
I mean, I think it's not true that we're subject to political and economic pressures. The reason we select this material is because we're looking for a broad spectrum of children's programs. It's not that somebody's come along to us and said, you've got less money to spend, therefore you will go and buy this program.
Is it not true, though, Andy, that these programs are cheap? They're very cheaply available from America.
Actually,
they've made their profits over
Actually,
there.
they're not cheap. I mean, some attempts have been made by less scrupulous people than most of our suppliers to provide them for free. We have never done that. We have always said, no, we will view the product as it comes in. We will decide purely on qualitative grounds whether it's something that we think fits in our schedule.
So you're saying they're good quality?
I believe they are good quality. I believe He-Man is a superb example of animation. I believe it's not wall-to-wall violence. I think if you analyzed any particular episode of He-Man, you would find that it's got a great deal of self-mocking in it. And I think there's a great danger that we actually underestimate the child's ability to distinguish from fantasy and reality.
Anna Hume, Jean Seaton was saying the stories are trivial. Would you like to pick up that point?
No, I don't think the stories, they're not great literature. We provide that in other places. But it's good, basic, fast-moving stories telling with goodies and baddies. All right, yes, they are a bit black and a bit white. But it moves, it's fun, it's entertaining. I don't believe that it's corrupting in any way. I buy it for exactly the same reasons that Andy does, not because I'm told to, but because I see it as something within a mixed schedule, and this is very important, within a mixed schedule of children's programming as we have at the moment, which provides a very important ingredient of relaxation and pure entertainment.
Ruth. in a balanced children's output, there is place for this kind of program. Do you agree?
I totally disagree, and I can disagree on about 10 counts, but obviously I'm not going to have the time to list those 10 counts. I mean, the first count is I think the storyline is impoverished. I think most children can't actually understand the content and the plot, but what they can understand is that the forces of good are strong, and they're white, and they're male, and they always win at the end of the day, whether the violence that they use is clever or whether it's casual. With reference to the whiteness of the programs, I'd like to actually pick up that I think the programs are both inherently racist at an overt and a covert level. And similarly, what we see is the association of darkness and blackness with evil. And in fact, if you look at Thundercats and you look at one of the characters within that, the Burbills episode, Mumra, in fact, the similarities in his characteristics to those of African descent are quite terrifying. And again, he's shrouded in this sort of cloak of darkness and evil.
Before you answer that, let me ask Nigel Andrew to add his criticism as well. Nigel? Violence, I think, is your concern.
Yes, I mean, I thought it was particularly amusing that these are described as relaxing programs, and that's the precise opposite of what they are. They're extremely overstimulating, especially to very small children. I think you probably don't take account of the fact that these programs are actually watched by 2- and 3-year-olds well preschool, and I have seen with my own eyes the effect that it has on them.
Describe
it. It is initially to mesmerize completely. So they're just lying there completely zonked watching this stuff. And then as soon as it's over, wham, into action, flailing about, going berserk.
Well, I have 5 children. We're not Martians in television. We actually, many of us preside over family life as well. And I don't notice my 3-year-old turning into something quite extraordinary after watching He-Man. He's usually quite bored with it, actually. Maybe he's not bright, but I mean, at 3, he doesn't really want to watch He-Man. He's a rainbow freak. But frankly, I think those who say that it has a deliberate and ascertainable effect on behavior, they must actually say just more than it does. They must start to demonstrate how it does. I mean, I think it is such a fantasy world. It's, to me, the world I grew up in was represented by Superman, Batman, Westerns, all of the things which I knew had no correspondence in my real life. But I mean, frankly, maybe violence watched by a 6-year-old on news at 5:45 or the 6 o'clock news on the BBC, where they see the confrontation on a miners' picket line, where grown-ups are behaving in a very violent way, that probably has a more profound effect,
So does,
I think.
Does reality violence justify fantasy violence?
No, but I think to assume that because you see a fantasy world, which we've all grown up with, all of us, be it Grimm's fairy tales, be it Dickens, be it whatever, there has always been a violence in children's literature. And the idea that it's a totally new development and breeding a nation of thugs seems to me to be unproved and quite dubious.
As always, the last word does go to the viewer, so let me invite Teresa Cooley.
Well, I disagree with everything you've said. I find them horrifying, all these programs. I won't let my children watch them. I've got a 3.5-year-old who'll sit glued to He-Man if I don't notice that she's actually doing it. In fact, once I caught her watching it, she jumped out of her skin in horror. I'm sorry, I'm not really watching He-Man. She knows I don't let her watch it. I don't like her seeing She-Ra, who is portrayed as the, the archetypal feminine woman with a bikini type on with big breasts and long legs and is always being dominated by the males in the series.
Let's go back now to KTCA to take a closer look at what the program makers and their critics say about these cartoons in America itself.
Thank you, Trevor. Clearly, there are strong feelings about the quality of American-made kid shows now showing up in Great Britain. But what do the American producers of these shows have to say about this international debate they've created? And just what kind of criticism have these shows stirred up here in the United States? Producer Brendan Heenahan took a look.
Now let's get one of Officer Dibble's feeding. That door leads to the firebomb launcher.
We have to learn to deal with the fact that that television set is no longer a children's plaything. For violence, the solution is enough alternative.
Peggy Charon has been the American voice of the kids' TV wilderness ever since she founded Action for Children's Television back in 1968. But the group has had few successes recently. For if the 1970s belonged to the watchdogs like Peggy Charon, the 1980s have belonged to those American He-Men.
By the power of Grayskull!
He-Man first exploded across American airwaves in 1983, and children's television hasn't been quite the same since. The He-Man and the Masters of the Universe series was the first children's show to be syndicated. It also ushered in the era of action toy cartoons. He-Man reflects a new world full of new realities. Reality number 1. He-Man and other shows like it are produced in California, home to Hollywood, home to glitz, and home to big budgets. The day of the small-scale, locally produced children's program is, for the most part, gone. Reality number 2. Networks no longer control animated children's shows. He-Man and most of its imitators are produced by syndicators. And reality number 3. Despite public concerns, it's now common for toy makers to be involved in children's television. It's a rare program that doesn't have some sort of merchandising agreement with a toy company. This is Filmation, one of the leading animation houses in the United States, and the only one that doesn't ship out its cartoon work to other countries. And the success of He-Man has had a lot to do with that. The show is a classic case of how kids' TV deals come about. The idea began with an existing toy product. It all happened one day back in 1983 when the Mattel Toy Company brought the He-Man name and concept to Lou Scheimer.
When we first heard the name, it was so macho and so male chauvinistic. I said, no, you can never. I mean, that'll never work. I said, it's awful. Every little girl in the audience is going to turn that down. And they didn't have a concept. They had a bunch of characters designed, guys with muscles. They're going to come ripping out of the forest and wreak havoc someplace. I told them we would be interested in doing it if we had total creative control.
I think we could use a tunnel.
That's just what I was thinking.
So Filmation brought He-Man out of the toy stores and onto the TV screens. Out, too, came the critics. And, not surprisingly, most of the criticism seemed to center around violence.
I may hate myself later, but...
But while the show's aggression worried critics, it didn't trouble Lou Scheimer.
Hey, what does violence really mean? I mean, He-Man has never killed Skeletor. In fact, every once in a while, we get letters, please let Skeletor win. It's getting boring seeing He-Man win. We did 130 episodes of Skeletor losing. It got to be a little difficult to figure out how to make him lose without killing him. Violence, more violence on the streets than there is on television. I get crazy with critics. Only with those who really watch our shows. I can understand that. If they have legitimate objections to what we do and know what we do and how we do it, then I can respond to that. But to be part of this blanket children's programming area and to be damned with the dross as well as the worthwhile material, I can't countenance that.
Why are the folks at Filmation so defensive? Well, for one thing, they think they do a good job. They resent the assumption that they don't care about the impact their cartoons have on children. Along with artists and illustrators, they employ a group of consultants whose job it is to look beyond the cartoon characters and establish guidelines, the show's list of philosophical do's and don'ts.
One major do that we wanted to implement in He-Man was that we wanted to show that despite the fact that this was kind of a bigger-than-life character, that he could engage in empathetic behavior. It's very important for young children to see their superheroes who show empathy and giving and caring and sharing behaviors. Those things are terribly important for superheroes to communicate.
The only thing these beasts fear is bright light. So...
Psychologists like Gordon Berry monitor the show, looking for danger signs, especially when it comes to violence.
I can recall, for example, that there was a scene where a number of the characters were captured, and they had them tied so that it appeared as if their feet were not touching the ground. Now, one character was a female character, and having a woman in the scene became particularly important because the distance between her feet and the ground, because she was generally smaller, seemed to be greater than the men. My suggestion was, of course, A, do not show them in pain. I was particularly concerned about the woman in bondage, and the woman's feet had to touch the ground.
Yet in this clip, supplied to us by Filmation, a captured female is indeed seen with her feet off the ground. Apparently, some days, not all the rules make it down to the animators.
Also commands Bakul, mightiest of sea demons.
Aside from the violence, there have also been concerns about gender and racial stereotyping in the He-Man show.
Hey, hey, hey! It's Bud Albert!
Filmation responds to the criticism by noting that it was co-creator with comedian Bill Cosby of the acclaimed Fat Albert cartoon series, and the company is quick to point out that its big show for this fall, a space western called Brave Star, features an American Indian in the title role. Still, Filmation says the race issue remains a problem.
There are not as many black people on He-Man as there should be. There aren't in the toys, period. You notice that Skeletor is purple. He is not black or brown. And there are no brown or black villains in our shows. I just won't do it because there are not enough brown or black good guys. And if there were plenty of brown or black good guys, then you could do brown or black villains. The way it is right now, that doesn't work.
Children see Skeletor as Skeletor. Children frequently don't have the whole repertoire of experiences, negative experiences particularly, to then jump to the conclusion that Skeletor is to portray, or any other character is to portray, some of the kind of social attitudes that adults have.
But perhaps the most persistent complaint lodged against the show is the charge of commercialism. Scheimer defends his relationship with Mattel Toys, the makers of the He-Man dolls.
As long as the show serves a worthwhile purpose, entertains and informs and perhaps enriches the life of the audience, I think there is no problem. I know the next question is how toy companies, how they're involved. Why do they do these things? They do them to sell toys, obviously. And if the producer is ethical and honest and forthright and demanding, he can make sure that the show itself is not objectionable.
As evidence of his independence, Scheimer says there were several times that he refused to incorporate new Mattel toys into the television series.
We had an ongoing battle many years ago with a character they wanted introduced in the shows. We wouldn't use the character. Basically, it was a guy called the Snake Man, and ripped off this outer layer, and these dozens of little snakes come pouring out of his stomach. Well, it was revolting. I said, kids will love these things. I said, yeah, kids may love them. They're going to horrify kids. We're just not going to do it. We don't have to do it.
If I don't find shelter soon, I'll be smashed to space dust.
Scheimer feels that action toy shows have been unfairly singled out for criticism. He points to the nearly universal praise heaped upon the PBS children's series Sesame Street, a show with many merchandising agreements.
Sesame Street is probably one of the most merchandised licensed concepts ever. Was it wrong? Absolutely not wrong. It was absolutely right. It was right for the kids. It was right for the programming. It made new programming. We get this money in, and if we get it from licensing, where does it go? It goes into other programs. We keep probably half the animators in this country at work. Hopefully, we'll be able to. I don't know how long we can keep it up. I mean, the foreign competition is fierce. That licensing helps that. I find that absolutely appropriate. We live in a capitalistic society. Ain't the government paying us to do these shows. It's people out there. And I like the system, because if you don't like us, you don't watch us, and we go off the air. We came up with the line, I have the power. It was wonderful to walk down the street and see a little kid come up and say, I have the power. What are we in this business for? We are here to communicate either ideas, concepts, fun. and you do it as effectively as you possibly can. Hey, you're there rooting for the hero. When I went to the Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon matinees when I was a kid, I was rooting for that cowboy up there on that white horse. I wanted this character to be that same guy. You don't want to hide him under a blanket someplace. If you've got He-Man, he's going to be a macho superhero. Have fun with him.
Sorry, big fella.
Joining us now in our studio are folks who can offer different perspectives on the making of American children's television. Peter Keefe is a producer with World Events Productions. Now, among Peter's credits is the Voltron cartoon series seen in Great Britain on the Children's Channel cable service. Jody Levin is here to address concerns about toy companies. She is with the Toy Manufacturers of America. And back with us again is this professor of psychology, Patricia Marks Greenfield. Trevor?
Well, I'm afraid, Jan, despite that epic 11 minutes of American produce there, our panel remain absolutely and determinedly unconvinced. Nigel, during the course of that, you were smirking and even giggling at one point. What was it that cracked you up in particular?
What I particularly liked was Lou Scheimer's cozy image of Main Street America with kids going up and saying, "I have the power." Well, when I see kids saying that, they're generally flailing about in the playground and doing a considerable amount of damage. There's no doubt that programs like He-Man contribute to the sort of mayhem that goes on in the playgrounds of infant and primary schools. And the sort of violence, it's a particular kind of violence because I don't think it even contains a particular aggressive intent, and it's unfocused. It's a very particular kind of violence, and it is distinct from the sort of violence that, of course, is all around us and occurs in other programs and so on.
Any of you want to pick up on that theme?
I'd like to say that it isn't just the violence. I mean, violence can be ritualised, but it's the total way in which there's a very long tradition of children's programmes in which children are made strong by seeing children do things. There are adventure stories around children. These programmes are just about grown-ups. There's no humour except these funny little things like Orko, and they don't give children a way of dealing with the world at all. They're just, they have no richness at all.
And you're saying there's nobody, no character with whom the children can identify as children?
Except as trivial joke characters.
Trevor, let me bring in American counterparts here, if I may. Patricia, let me start with you. Is there indeed proof that the violence in He-Man causes children on playgrounds to act violently? Is there any proof?
I don't think any research has been done on He-Man specifically, but there are years and years of studies looking at the effect of violence on television on behavior, and the overwhelming majority of studies do show that violent television stimulates aggressive behavior.
Peter, you're a producer of Voltron, one of the children's shows that's under criticism. Don't you feel you have some moral responsibility to reduce violence, to reduce what might be perceived by parents as sexist or even racist caricatures?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I not only think we have that responsibility because we're entrusted to a small part of a child's day each day, it is a responsibility we take seriously. Our shows all have children heroes, teen heroes. Voltron was rated by the National Coalition on Television Violence as having less violence than Roadrunner or Tom and Jerry, some real soft animated shows. But our shows have a theme, and it's not just good versus evil. Often our heroes lose. Often kids learn that you can lie and get away with it, but you don't feel too good about it afterwards. So I think we have to be careful to look at the broad spectrum of children's shows in this genre, rather than just selecting a couple.
Trevor, let me throw a question back to one of your panel members, and it's namely this. You have the power to turn the television set off. Some of you are exercising that power. Why not just exercise it completely and simply refuse your children the right to watch U.S.-made programs?
Yes, you're right. We do have the power to turn the television off. That is if you believe that we're always with our children when the television is on. That is if you believe that when they go to other people's houses, they've not got videos of the programs that we despise. And that is if you believe that within our schools, those videos are not shown sometimes just to keep a class quiet or during a wet playtime or as, an extra special treat. So therefore, what we'd like to see within the programs is an idea of balance. And I don't think there's any balance
balance within them whatsoever. What they seek to do and what they are doing very, very well within a society that's becoming much more divided with reference to success and with reference to rich and with reference to poor is showing certain groups of children that the strongest way and the toughest way wins. And if you're weak, then you just go to the wall and damn you.
Well, this whole business of violence was dealt with there from the American end. Were you satisfied with their replies?
No.
No, because I don't think violence is merely what we're complaining about.
No.
They like to talk about violence because they've got an argument about that. What they don't like to talk about is, as they've said, they don't have any other television programs for children. That bad money has actually driven out your children's choice and will in time drive out our children's choice, because that kind of programming gets rid of some of the wonderful fantasy material that television has produced. And so that's one of the things we're really very concerned about, and I would have thought you would have been much more concerned. You lost all your other programming.
Trevor, we have a state's response here coming in. Jody?
Well, I'm starting to think that maybe we're losing our perspective here. We'd really like very much for our kids to be watching the opera and to be working extra math problems in their spare time. However, kids don't like that stuff. Neither do we.
I think that's an absurd kind of view. We weren't saying that. We were saying that we want our children, and I imagine you want your children entertained in ways that enable them to be strong, just, successful. Your programs don't do that. They teach them just to be little passive idiots.
And we want to see programs that do not just merely continue to reflect values of, say, 20 or 30 years ago. We want to see those racial stereotypes out. We want to see those sexual stereotypes of women put out. And
Ruth,
we want to see more complex
Ruth,
plots.
let's have the states have a reply.
Thank you, Trevor. Peter, jump in.
There's an interesting trend now occurring in the United States. First of all, we do have lots of other shows besides action-adventure shows. We have public television here that provides hours every week of lovely shows for kids to watch. Just like you have Dickens, we have Tom Sawyer and Dickens as well. So the children's menu is not limited by anything beyond his desire or his decision to turn a channel one way or another. I think what we're presuming here is that there's not a lot of parenting going on, and it's easily understandable with single-parent households how parents can be real upset about being away from home working and wondering what their children are watching. But I think we're presuming that there isn't enough nurturing going on during school from 8 to 3 in the afternoon. Now, on a second point, last year in the United States, kids' television viewing dipped down because there were too many action-adventure shows, and the kids just stopped watching them. So now producers are coming out, now kids, to prevent that Pied Piper effect from occurring and the anti-girl gridlock, because there aren't a lot of girl heroes, producers are producing much softer, better thought-out shows that have to work as entertainment first, and then perhaps merchandise later.
The problem over here, as it's seen, is that with the very close, one would say intimate tie-in between the toy manufacturers and the cartoon manufacturers, it is very difficult across the Atlantic to perceive that these items are made, should we say, with no regard for the kind of merchandising and profits that might follow.
This is the big new problem, is the commercialism. And the fact that we're seeing the programs become half-hour commercials. And there has been some research to actually show that for very young children with very popular kinds of characters, the program can actually function as a better commercial than the show itself. And I think that what's happening in Britain now is you've expanded your free market. There's competition. Popularity of the shows is becoming important there as it's always been here. This creates problems. In education of children, we don't just let them do the most popular thing. If we did, nobody would go to school. And I think with the free market system, we have to rely a lot more on media education at school in order to raise the level of popular taste.
I disagree in a sense. It is not a new concept to have a TV show that sells merchandise. We have a show here called Sesame Street, as Lou Scheimer mentioned, that gets a great deal of its revenue to do the show from selling merchandise. We had 30 years ago, Davy Crockett. We've had a plethora of shows, including the Mickey Mouse Club, that do just that. The question is, are there shows that are video toy catalogs? You betcha. But are there equally as many shows in the United States available for children to watch that do have lovely stories with character development, a beginning, a middle, and an end? There certainly are. So again, let's be careful not to group them all together.
There's another point, Peter, which is that a top television show does not necessarily mean that a toy will be a success, and vice versa. It doesn't work that way. For example, the Smurfs are a very, very hot TV show here. The toy product sells moderately. Likewise, the number one toy, or one of the number one toys last year, was Laser Tag. But Laser Tag Academy has just been dropped by NBC.
Well, Jody, I have to ask you this, though. I must, and that is, are the toy manufacturers ever going to come out with a female toy that is flat-chested and short of leg? I mean, really.
Well,
come on.
Little girls like to fantasize. Little boys don't buy ugly toys either.
Oh,
little girls want to aspire to what they perceive to be beautiful.
Oh, but well, then I'm voting for the flat-chested women of the world.
Yeah, and I'm going to be steamrolled here unless I let some of the women in the studio respond to that.
Please do.
I think it's disgraceful. The producer of Voltron, whatever that disgraceful program is, trying to make out that single parents are less able to care for their children and therefore let them watch these things because they haven't got time and they have to go out to work. I'm appalled that he can make that remark. Also, can I make the point that girls are heroines, not girl heroes? And the other thing is, last Christmas, I seem to remember there was a thing on our television which showed the most popular toys for boys and the most popular toys for girls. And My Little Pony and Rainbow Bright, all these horrible little things for girls came out tops. And He-Man and Masters of the Universe and all these ghastly things that we've been talking about tonight came out tops for boys. So it's obviously sexist stereotypes, and I'm very worried about this.
And in a society that is supposed to be promoting the idea of equality of opportunity, I don't actually want girls to fantasize on women that have breasts that are 36 size and waists that are 24 and long brown legs and great, long blonde flowing hair. I don't want it. They've got to be given other things to look at, other things to fantasize about. And similarly with boys. I work not only as a parent but also as an educationalist. And when I'm in the playground and I have to reprimand children for what we call over here toy fighting, which is an excuse for two boys fighting with two of those disgusting plastic toys, I mean, it's gone too far. And they have to have them because of the peer group has them. So therefore, they somehow or another get their parents to buy them.
But Jan, I gather there is more to come. I gather over there has been some experimentation with interactive toys?
Absolutely. Interactive toys, Trevor. And that is where, I think within a year, isn't this correct, Peter? Maybe as soon as this fall, signals are going to be transmitted from the television set to a computer toy that a child may own in his or her living room, and that toy will react and respond. This is like 1984, isn't it, Peter?
Basically, interactive could be Orwellian if you chose to think, again, that the child is not receiving any kind of education except the 2 hours each day that he or she watches television. You could frighten yourself. And what I was saying about a single parent is it's easy to make a single parent, I think, feel neurotic because they don't have as many hours as they'd like to. Nobody does have as many hours as they'd like to parent their children, I don't think. We all would like to have more time. The point, interactivity, yeah, basically what it is, it's a signal that comes from a TV that can make a toy move left or right, or that can make a stuffed animal say something. Its biggest life will be on videotapes, home video. Again, though, these are all things parents must buy for their children.
Okay, but
they don't come in the mail for free.
But isn't that rather... Yes, Trevor, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Peter whether these toys will carry on in the tradition of Voltron and the rest and start zapping everything in sight. Can you zap from the comfort of your own armchair?
Indeed, you can interact with the television set and do just that. I think we can't recite...
I'm trying to avoid the word interact. It's a euphemism. Can you zap? Do you kill? What do you do?
You don't kill. It's like a video game where you can score points. The first ones out are like that. It's a very new technology.
Isn't it rather elitist, Peter, in that it's going to require some rather expensive purchases? In other words, only children who have a wealthy parent or parents are...
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, there are toys on the market today, as all parents know, that cost $100 for a talking doll or $50 for a set of action figures or a tank, and toys that have popular names that are merchandised well, as the man said, with the Sword of Omen, just like Calvin Klein jeans or any other merchandisable name,
Peter,
are not expensive.
Peter, forgive me for interrupting. We're running out of time, and you've had a good explanation there, an exposition of what these interactive toys are, but I'd like to snatch a quick moment with our two TV bosses to ask whether they will buy these interactive toys for British audiences. Anna Hume.
Well, it's not a question of buying the interactive toys, it's a question of whether we're going to buy the programmes.
Forgive me.
We haven't seen the programmes. I have seen one demo which shows something of an interactive toy. I can't tell from that what the program's like, and until I've seen the program, I'm not going to make any decision as to whether or not it's a program I wish to buy. If enjoyment of that program is dependent on the toy, then I think it's highly unlikely that I would buy the program.
Thank you. Ruth, let me give you the last word. As you know, our viewers always have the last word on this program. Ruth, are you satisfied with that, or do you think you might have to push Anne and Andy and the rest of those kind of people to keep to their decision?
Well, I hope you will keep to your decision, but unfortunately I doubt it, because if in fact they make a lot of money, I'm sure you will buy it. But to sum up, I really do feel that in a society that is based on violence, as Lou Scheimer actually rightly said, we have to be promoting alternative images where we do see girls and we do see black people in positive roles. Otherwise, our society is fated to become even more divided than it is already.
Okay, Ruth, allow me to sum all this up. Thank you very much indeed over there in the States. It seems that over here, what we're most keen to have is diversity. Obviously, the argument about violence and the tie-in with toy manufacturers can go on for a long, long time. But what we do stick rigidly by is what we can measure, and that is choice. We want choice as great a diversity as possible. For the time being, thank you very much indeed, Minneapolis St. Paul. Thank you very much indeed, Jan, and your guests.
And thanks from all of us, Trevor, here in the United States. I am sure that this debate will go on both sides of the Atlantic. Good night to all of you. Well, that's it for tonight's program. Now, one final note. As always on Almanac Extra, we are interested in your opinion on what you have seen. So pick up your phone and ring us up, as the British would say, with your thoughts about tonight's discussion about children's programming. The number to the KTCA answering machines is 642-1980. That number again, 642-1980. Thanks to the folks at Channel 4 in London, and thanks to our studio guests, and thanks to you. Until next time, this is Jan Ingrid Smaby. Good night.
Tomorrow on Cousteau's Odyssey, Jacques Cousteau and his crew journey around the world in search of clues to the lost city of Atlantis. Is the ancient story true? Calypso's Search for Atlantis, part of the World of Cousteau, tomorrow night at 8. Almanac Extra is part of the Survive Project, made possible by grants from the Pillsbury Company Foundation, the B.C. Gamble and P.W. Skoglo Foundation, and the Northwest Area Foundation. Additional funding is provided by the James R. Thorpe Foundation, First Banks, members of First Bank System, the Minneapolis Star and Tribune and its newspaper and education program serving Minnesota schools, the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, and the Hitachi Foundation. Almanac Extra is a production of KTCA for the Minnesota Public Television Association.